I'm here today with two great guys in the tech and financial services ecosystem in the region. My brother, Robert Ochieng, and I'll come back to Robert. He'll do his introduction. And Peter Ndiang'ui. Peter is a tech entrepreneur. He's also pretty experienced in the e-commerce ecosystem in the region. Guys, welcome to Ali TalksTech.
Thank you.
As I always try to do in my introductions, I like to ask my guests to talk a little bit about themselves, family, career-wise, where we are at. And then we delve into our conversation today, which really is about everything about tech and the tech ecosystem, financial services in the region. Robert, your first love, personal financial education and stuff like that. So, Robert, over to you. Who is Robert?
Thank you very much, Ali, for having me. So my name is Robert Ochieng. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Abojani Investment, which is a wealth tech here in Kenya. And looking at my history, my background is actually in computer technology. Then over the years, I worked in the financial services sector. At one point, I was working at Equity, and that's where I fell in love with the financial services industry.
Do you mean Equity?
Yeah, that one. The one that everyone knows now across the globe. Yeah, so I fell in love at a time when we were doing some implementation for an NSE trading system and just got into stock market, wealth management and stuff like that. And later on, we built a very big ecosystem in terms of online communities with over 400,000 people now. And that's
Abojani now?
Yes, that now gave birth to Abojani.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Also, the community came before Abojani?
Yes. So we front-loaded investments.
Interesting.
Yeah, so spent a lot of time doing offline meetings as well to build the community, because we realized that actually the biggest challenge is making finance relatable to everyone else before even you start selling products to them. And sometimes people do it the other way around, where you build a platform, you say you are the best, and you find that no one is coming to your platform. So we started with a community, creating trust, since financial services industry is very big on trust.
Yes.
And now from there, we've now built a startup that I can say is focused on African values of the dinner table conversations.
Focused on the African values of the dinner table conversation.
Yes, the dinner table.
That's an interesting concept. Could you sort of expound a little bit on that for my viewers?
The dinner table is like the pulse of an African family. When they're happy, you'll see them smiling there. And if there's something that is disturbing them,
nobody's
at the family
smiling.
level, nobody's smiling. So that's where we go. And sometimes the smiles can be because of the money that they have. They've achieved their goals. And when they're not smiling, it means that there's something that is troubling them. Maybe it's too much debt or there's just some problem in the family.
Okay.
So when we go there, then it's much easy to expand the conversation, because the dad will be there, the mother will be there, the daughter, depending on the structure
extended
of the
family.
Yes,
the cousins,
yes,
and so on.
Yes. So that way is much easier to know that the daughter maybe she need to go to school. The dad is a corporate CEO somewhere. He hangs out with his friends. So if you have a product for him, he's likely to tell his friends. And the mother might be an entrepreneur, maybe in some chama. So if you get into these people, you are likely to reach many Africans. So that's our philosophy.
That is quite interesting. Peter, over to you. Who is Peter?
Great. Thank you so much, Ali, for having us here. I am Peter Ndiang'ui, currently a co-founder at GoBeba. GoBeba is a platform for ordering home essentials, and you get them in less than an hour. And so we started off working.
What area do you cover right now?
So we cover Nairobi and Mombasa now. We started out as an e-commerce platform. I'm always in love with marketplaces. But later on, we started seeing that we needed to pivot and become a real retailer. And previously, we thought we were solving a problem of convenience only.
Could I just stop you there for 1 minute?
Sure.
What do you mean by real retailer?
Very good. Real retailer meaning that we actually own and stock inventory now. Previously, we were connectors of people to other retailers. And then we saw that the convenience proposition is great, but it did not have a long-term supply chain transformation. And what we see we need at the moment in this region is actually transforming the way the supply chain works. And so that's what we've set ourselves to do. That's what our pivot has been about in the last couple of months. And so we now have micro-fulfillment centers around Nairobi from where the stuff that you order gets delivered from.
Would you please expound on that concept of micro-fulfillment?
Great. If you look at e-commerce 1.0, which is probably where most of Africa has been, the Amazon of centralized logistics, we've seen significant challenges.
Something like Jumia?
Exactly. Where people order, you consolidate their orders, and then somewhere in a centralized logistics, they get picked up by a truck, and then the following day they get delivered. Now, we run a completely opposite of that. We, instead of thinking about economies of scale from a centralized logistics point of view, we think about economies of density. And so therefore, the micro-fulfillment centers are small little warehouses located close to customers in suburbs. And they are tethered to when you order your goods, we then route your order to the nearest dark store to you. What we see with that...
Wait a minute there. Dark store, like there's no light? Or what do you mean by dark store?
So the micro-fulfillment center, we also call it AKA dark store. Because you can't really go and shop in there. It's a small warehouse. We are talking about warehouse, we are talking about probably not more than 80 square meters. It's probably between 20 to 80 square meters. Very, very tiny.
I mean, almost like a kiosk.
It's almost like a kiosk, right? And then, believe it or not, in a typical supermarket, your walkways occupy about 65% of the supermarket.
Space.
Exactly, yes. So therefore, this is one of the biggest costs of a supermarket P&L that occupies 65%. And the 65% of the space is actually empty for you to come and walk. That's
real estate that is basically, by all intents and purposes, sitting empty.
Empty, and it's the most expensive real estate, commercial real estate, sitting somewhere in a mall.
Interesting.
And so no wonder that in the last 5 years, we've seen terrible failures, not only of indigenous...
globally.
Exactly. Even the ones that have entered Kenya have left.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the area we are working on. Before I got into GoBeba, I was previously at NASPAS. As GM of OLX here in Kenya.
So please explain to my viewers what NASPAS is and what the visible things that they can see that NASPAS does in this region.
Right. So NASPAS in this region, you probably have heard of OLX. That was NASPAS.
Correct.
I was running that. You'll also see DSTV in this market. That's NASPAS. But globally is where probably you'll see the true picture of what NASPAS is. Tencent in China.
The Chinese giant.
Chinese giant. You'll see probably NASPAS could be ranked as one of the biggest tech investors of our time.
Wow.
And one of the...
Globally,
yes.
This is a South African company.
This was a South African newspaper.
Wow.
Company that became a giant in tech investment.
I hope my good friend and my brother who runs Longhorn, Mr. Wahome, is listening to this. I will make sure that he gets this clip.
I think the case study of NASPAS is something that should be studied by anybody in the publishing industry in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Interesting. Peter, thank you so much. That was a great introduction. Robert, thank you so much. That was a great introduction. Now, as is usually my case, I like to shoot from the hip. I have no script. I just want us to discuss stuff that really interests us. Robert, Peter, both of you and myself are in this super exciting and interesting group on WhatsApp called the Digital Disruption Caucus. That was started by my good friend Jerry Shikule and a few others, Lenny, sorry.
Zembo.
Yes, and a few others. And we have interesting and great conversations. In fact, sometimes I get the feeling that you can come out of there with a mini MBA on any of the conversations that we have. One of our most interesting conversations that keep on continuously recurring is this issue around startup funding, issues around how to grow a business in Africa, the issues to do with SME funding and stuff like that. Look, I just want us to have a conversation around that. Robert, you have very strong views when it comes to this. You have an open mic. Let's talk about that. Peter, I give you the opportunity to interrupt Robert if you feel that it is something you disagree on.
Sure.
Then we can, and I will jump in as we have this conversation.
Perfect.
Boss, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I think from my point of view, I would look at financing from finance point of view. So that would be looking at finance as having 5 key elements. So of course, before you start any business, you need some assets, right? And the assets can either be funded by debt or equity. So that is where the bank or someone else has given you some sort of loan.
Okay, so asset.
Yes.
Number one.
Funded by either equity or debt. So under equity is basically someone who has ownership in your company. It can be yourself. So that is where the business
or
starts.
An investor.
Yes. The business starts even before any sale has been made.
Correct.
Then now you have 2 activities, which can either be you are sacrificing value, which is expenses. Then you are generating value, which is revenue. So basically, once you have those 5 things, then you have a business. Of course, other things will come in, but at the end of the day, that is what will make that business go forward or not from a sustainability point of view. So the most interesting thing is that while traditionally a business can be funded using debt or equity, it can also be funded using revenue. So that is the money from customers. So my view is that...
So paying customers are
paying customers,
an important component of any business.
And it's actually the cheapest source of funding.
Correct.
And I think that hasn't been highlighted enough. So when you hear conversations from SMEs or startups locally, it is mostly they're saying they're not being funded. Yeah, which I think if this information is out there, it could help more people. So it could help more people because when you look at revenue, I would say that then we should be spending a lot of time standing at the top of KICC, talking about our startups, our products and services, so that we go for the cheapest source of funding.
Correct.
Yes, we need to be all out there on LinkedIn, Facebook, and even the entrepreneurial ecosystems and SMEs. In my view, they need to be media companies. So they need to, like the ones that I'm in, they need to tell people about Abojani, which I see I'm at Sandbox as the wealth and investment expert. As Abojani, we are there. And they do market to their ecosystem. Someone from Tanzania the other day told us that they saw that advert on Sandbox and then they joined our sessions. So you see, that is the cheapest. While we are looking at these other sources of funding, what is the little that we can do? So that is one thing when you look at the cheapest source of funding. Then the other thing, when you look at SME ecosystem, that needs to be highlighted, because what I've learned sitting and working with SMEs is that sometimes they don't know how to express their problems, and people take advantage of them and speak on their behalf. That banks are not lending to you, then it becomes a song. But when you sit with the SME, again, you'll hear that, I did this work worth 5 million, 20 million. I've never been paid for the last 3 years. Then I ask them, why, if you could have been paid that money, would you even need the bank financing? They say no. Then I ask them, what is your biggest problem? They say not being paid. So in my view, we need to do a proper research on the receivables that SMEs have. And that's where
That's a very good point.
Yes. And that's where now definition of revenue is actually not money.
And I think there is some policy and regulatory intervention coming up.
Yes.
On delaying payment to suppliers. That could be an interesting one.
Yeah, and it affects them. And the education that SME need now to expand on is that revenue is not money. It is an activity. Yeah. So
could you just expound?
Once you understand
on
that,
Robert?
let me tell you, for example,
revenue is not money.
It is an activity. Yes.
Please expound on
so
it.
This activity means you have created value for your customers. So
Correct.
Let's say a corporate calls us as a Bojani and we have an opportunity to make 10 million Kenyan shillings. So we'll be so excited, everything will stop. So we'll use our resources to deliver that value.
Okay.
And we'll book it as revenue. That is 10 million. It still hasn't hit our bank account. Then sometimes we have to chase after that payment, and to the extent of even begging, because if it goes beyond the contractual obligation of like 1 month, 3 months, now you are just hoping that one day you'll be paid.
You'll be paid.
Yes. So at the end of the year, you can have 100 million in revenue and maybe only 20 million in your bank account.
I see what you
or
mean.
you've worked
jobs
worth 2 million and only 100,000 has been paid. So you end up not having that money. And you see, if you could have taken some financing from a bank, expecting that you'd be paid within 1 month, you are in trouble. Once you are in trouble, the way things work, let's be honest and not lie about discrimination or things like that. The way the algorithms work is that they put people, they are called classifications.
Yes.
So if you are an SME and SMEs are likely to behave this way,
you're put in that group.
Treated. And you're going to be treated that way as an SME because Robert misbehaved. Right. Yeah, and you're also very likely...
collective punishment. Basically.
Yes, collective punishment. And that is coming from the underlying problem of people not being paid in time. We've heard of supermarket chains that have collapsed with over 20 billion owed to SMEs.
Quite a number of them, actually.
Quite a number. And our good friends, the government, with over 400 billion in unpaid bills. Yes, pending bills. So that money alone, if it could be unlocked in the economy, I think the need for financing will be very low, or finance players will be able to trust SMEs more, because now we know that when someone tells you that they're going to pay you within 1 month, that is a contract that you can trust. But if they're going to pay you when they want,
then that's a problem.
That's a problem. Yeah.
Peter, what do you have to say?
Actually, there are a lot of areas that I agree completely with Robert. For example, revenue is an activity. I think startups usually live by the cash flow sword. Cash flow is really the soul of any startup, and so.
So let me just stop you there, Peter, and let's dwell into that a little bit. We have lots of buzz right now across Africa about startup funding. Is that funding from venture capitalists also cash flow? And how sustainable is that? One of the things that has been something that we discuss, not just in Kenya and Africa, but globally, is the VC model of funding. Right? And there are certain metrics that VCs look for. Growth. Growth is one of the key metrics that they look at. Sometimes to the extent, and by the way, any VC who disagrees with me, I'm free to host them here and let's come and have a conversation about this. It's almost like having revenue is a sin from a VC's perspective. Look, and I'm not trying to point at anyone in particular, so I'm not going to mention any names because that would be unfair. But looking at the number of funding that has happened over the years, not just in Africa and Kenya, but across the world, you find that there are companies that have been funded with zero revenue, with no potential initially for growth, but then they have sprouted and grown into what we today know as big tech.
That's right.
Google, Facebook. Facebook had no revenue for 5 years.
That's right.
So how do we reconcile that with what Robert has said?
Great.
But before you go there, just one last thing, I want to say, which should sort of make us have this conversation deeper, is most startups today, if you hear how they talk, is like they have taken the mantra of Mark Zuckerberg, move fast and break things. Is it true? Is it the same today as when Facebook was being built, or has the world completely changed?
So I think to have this conversation properly, let's first contextualize it and talk about the different types of businesses
Correct.
or entrepreneurial pursuits
Okay.
that Kenyans, Africans, and sometimes we can say globally, you'll find yourself getting into.
Yes.
The first one is a kiosk, right?
At the lowest level.
Yeah, usually if you look at a kiosk, and there's nothing wrong about having a kiosk,
Yes.
it's usually more about survival mode, right? So most likely the person running a kiosk outside your house, sometimes, and in most cases, if you give them a better job that is salaried, they would actually probably close the kiosk, right? So these are folks on a survival mode. The second type of entrepreneurial pursuit, and you'll find that largely with the middle class, is a lifestyle type of a business. Advisory services or consulting engagements. You'll find the way people will see them in their lives is to improve their lifestyle, get a better house, get a better car. Tenderpreneurs usually will be lifestyle types of businesses, owning maybe a single restaurant somewhere, and a lot of middle classes in a city here will run a lot of lifestyle businesses, and I think they fall into that place that Robert probably talked about.
Yes.
In terms of SMEs or micro businesses that are not really on the survivorship, but they are lifestyle businesses. It's what Kenyans sometimes call side hustles when they are still working, right? The third type of an entrepreneurial pursuit is a high growth, technology or innovation-led type of a business, okay? And so when we talk about venture funding, then we are talking about that type.
Those type of businesses.
Exactly.
So give some examples.
Okay. I'll start with Gobeba.
Okay. Gobeba is one. Okay.
High growth, innovation, tech-led.
Yes.
It could be built for flip or to be sold, or it could be built to keep
So
for dividends.
Built to flip,
Yeah,
or built to last.
exactly. Right. And either of those are actually, there's nothing wrong with that. Most VCs will put their money into the high growth with a view of flipping.
Yes.
It is an asset class that they
Yeah,
are not
for them they have an exit strategy,
Exit.
which is usually between 6 to 8 years.
correct.
Yes.
And they are not taking money from LPs so that they can put it in a bank account. Those
Peter, what's an LP? At my age, when you talk about LP, I'm thinking about those LPs that we used to play.
Yeah?
Yes, those ones.
So let's briefly talk about a venture fund.
Yes.
Will be-
How is that structured?
Yeah, so you have a venture capital fund. As a general partner, you are the one managing the fund.
Okay.
And then you probably put in, like, say, if you're starting, say, at 10 million shillings as a venture fund, you probably put in 100,000 shillings of your money.
So that's a general partner.
That's a general partner.
Okay.
At least maybe 1%
Running
of
the fund day to day.
day to day. And then the rest of 900,000, you have to go looking for that money from other individuals.
Okay.
They could be institutions, they could be family offices,
So those are
they
then
could
the
be
limited
high net
partners.
worth. Yeah, those are the limited partners.
Okay.
So if they give you these 900,000 so that you can keep it for 7 years or 8 years and then return it back to them,
Correct.
they're not giving it to you because they didn't have an alternative. Or
It's
put
not
it,
charity.
no, it's not charity, and it's not that they were lacking a bank to put them or a
Correct.
money market fund to put the money so that they can earn 12% or 9%.
So they're looking for high growth.
They are very clear. It's high risk, it's high growth. So therefore, you as a VC, that's what you go looking for. Who is this who might need some cash today? Because tomorrow they'll become the next Facebook or the next bigger than they are today by 100 times.
So Robert here believes that VCs, to a large extent, are distorting the market for financial services.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, and I can explain.
Explain that to us, Robert.
Yeah. So what we are talking about is good, and that is basically what grows an ecosystem, because the ecosystem is grown by individual.
Yes.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, as part of civilization, we need to have a view of where we want to go as a country, and that's why we can't get ahead of the country. And it's important.
Why not? Why can't we get ahead of the country?
We can't get ahead of the country because the country plays a very good role in making things workable for many people.
But what if the country is too slow, Robert?
If the country is too slow, what will happen is that you'll end up building a mall and no one will be coming to it. So we have that responsibility of duality, and the duality comes in that from just studying history. If we study history, I think we'll be having a totally different conversation, because if you study history, like the VC model is built basically from Silicon Valley. We know the history. There's a little bit of Cold War there that made people to be more creative. Semiconductors came into play.
Yes.
There's a university play there. So there's a foundation that was built there. And the other thing that we need is the education that VC, like personally, I deal with investments, and I have some investments in startups. Yeah. And I know very well that that's a high risk investment.
Okay.
So it's like 1 out of 10 will work.
So Robert, you're a
Yes.
VC, and yet you're saying that you don't believe in the VC model. What's
So what it means, let me tell you, when you
that's
look at
contradictory in terms.
when you look at personal finance,
Yes.
you'll have a portfolio.
Uh-huh.
Of course, any day, any time when
Yes.
I'm sleeping and you just give me like 10 million, I know where I'll put it, like money market fund. That's
Correct.
where money at rest. Yeah, and I can have a good night's sleep.
Mm.
Then from there are investments that I can do, like stock market,
Yes.
bonds, and also there's this high risk, which I know can do 30 times, it can do 10, or it can also be 0. But now, if you want to grow more entrepreneurs in our ecosystem, I think we need to look at the path of least resistance. Because if we create this idea that startup way is the way to go, it is not really scalable in terms of wanting to have like 1 million people in business. That's why I think the conversation needs to be structured, and we need now to have it at national level. Because now what I'm seeing, people from outside who are investors, like personally, I'm an investor in 2 startups that are global startups. So there's an element
on a funding platform.
Yes, there's a funding platform, a crowdsourcing platform where you can invest as little as you wish, maybe as little as just $1,000. Yes. Yeah. So that has democratized that part.
Would you like to educate my viewers on that for a few minutes?
Yeah. So basically, when you talk about crowdsourcing, there's a company in the UK known as Crowdcube. So they have a platform, crowdcube.com. So there you can even invest in Crowdcube itself. There's a time there's an offer for Klarna, which is a very big innovator in the buy now, pay later space. And you could put even just $3,000 and you become an investor.
Okay.
So those are options. And sometimes people in that space, they're called angel investors, stuff like that. But basically, they're people who believe in startups.
Okay, so basically, Robert, it's not like you don't believe in the VC model.
Yes.
What you are basically saying is that we need to tweak it to how our ecosystem works. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just to expand on that,
Yes.
the way I would look at it is this way, simple. That yes, I have that personal responsibility to make sure that my family is happy, my wife is happy,
Yes.
my children are happy,
Yes.
my mother. That is personal, which is personal success. So it should not come at the expense of the nation. So we need to devote enough time also for building the whole ecosystem. Else you'll have that situation where I was telling you can have an empty mall, which has happened to some billionaires in Kenya.
That's true.
So that other responsibility where I'm coming in is to now guide these young people that these are the options that are available.
Okay.
And that when you talk about this VC, it is still a relatively new thing in Kenya. And this model, it is just it is something that has come from nowhere and is like a dance party at 3 a.m. People are just dancing.
Okay.
So you need to be careful about it because we've seen in this ecosystem and finance is something that is very seductive. People could actually say that GE was brought down by finance. They took too much risk in doing finance instead of doing their core business.
Which
some,
was manufacturing.
Some local investment firms, or they went into finance element, these jargons, fair value gains. Then COVID came, they didn't have money. That's why we say we really need to be careful to go
how we structure this.
Yes, to go to value creation, because VC is basically investing. Like they have invested there. Believe you me, I'm expecting returns 5 times or 10 times.
Yes.
I'm sorry to say, but whatever the customers, those would just be stories. But at the back of my mind, if we remove the story element, the guys want returns.
Peter.
So Ali, let me just finish it off. So the guys want returns, and if we let it go too far, then let's say even 100 startups have been funded here, and only 10 will succeed. I think that is too far much ahead for us an ecosystem, because if you look even at the history of VC, we are talking about generational wealth.
Yes.
I've helped local VCs do due diligence and made investments of over $7 million.
Yes.
And what happens is that they have family offices. Guys have come together. So here in Kenya, if you ask us, do we even have extra income at family level? So we are still not at that stage. Now is when we are learning. People are learning about estate administration and succession planning to have excess. When you have excess, your problems will definitely change. And now you can take more risk. So I feel like the building blocks, we are going too much ahead of ourselves. And that's why I say that whole buzz.
What you're saying is we are moving too fast.
Yes, that whole buzz, I feel it is a big distraction. If we could just go and even build Konza, like Chinese built their Shenzhen, borrowing from Silicon Valley, that would really help us. And
some people would say that Konza is more a real estate project than a technology project. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it can be tweaked because you have to believe and see the
building block. It can be both.
Yes.
Okay.
It can be both, where you can create an ecosystem. Just like when you go to JKUAT, you just feel like you are a tech if you are in a computer science class. There's some energy that is there. So we need to create
some positive vibe that is going on there.
Yes, because we need to create that. Because the feedback that I've received, for example, about our current innovation hubs is like they're just Silicon Valley wannabe. Yeah. They're not.
I'll come back to that. Yes. I like that. Silicon Valley wannabes. I'll come back to that. Peter, what are your thoughts on this whole conversation? I know I interrupted you a bit.
Yeah.
But please proceed.
No, let's proceed. So the first thing, I think, going back to the structure that we started with of a kiosk, lifestyle business,
and a tech growth,
a technology innovation-led growth company. Actually, if you look at where we are as a country, we are actually locally funding the high growth tech led companies. We are dismal at it.
We are what? We are dismal.
Yeah.
We are not funding
We're not doing it. All the funding that is actually coming. Last year, we had about 50 billion Kenya shillings coming into the ecosystem. That's
about $500 million.
That's right.
Almost. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. If you look at it, not even 5% of that is local.
Where do you think the problem is?
Let me go there. We have a Private Equity and Venture Capital Act, right, which actually gives pension funds a leeway to invest at least 10%. Around that, it's 5 or 10% of their funds into private equity or VC.
So let's take that for 1 minute and look at the National Social Security Fund.
Yeah.
Robert, do you have an idea of what the total value of NSSF is?
Yeah, they're about 300 billion, slightly over 300 billion.
300 billion Kenya shilings.
Yes, and the pension funds...
It's about 1.3 trillion.
1.3
pension
trillion.
Funds are at over 1.4.
1.3, 1.4 trillion.
Exactly.
So let's take 5% of that.
Yep.
What's 5% of that? Quickly.
It could be, let's say, 70
billion to 100 billion.
Yeah.
So about 200 billion Kenya shillings? Or is that
about 100 billion? Let's call it 70 billion Kenya shillings.
70 billion Kenya shillings?
That's
Now,
that's 5%.
yeah. So if we take 70 billion Kenya shillings and we say that hypothetically now we are sitting here and we are saying we are at the top echelons of government. We can push that.
That's right.
And it's not even a policy. It's an act that is already there.
It's already an act.
Let's activate it and let's actualize it.
Yeah.
How would that change the ecosystem and the environment, Robert?
Thank you very much. And that's what brings the distraction view that I insist on, is that we are distracted. We are just saying it is working in the US, let's bring it here. And let me tell you, the feedback that I've received even from the regulators and ordinary Kenyans is that as techies, we are too far away from people. So even definition of fintech, we saw that people are fine.
What do you mean we are too far away from people, Robert?
Even parliamentarians didn't know the definition of a digital bank. It is our responsibilities as the innovators. If you come up with something new early, we need to make more people aware about it so that it is relatable. You'll get early adopters, then they help you spread the gospel. But
so I have no problem with that. And that's why some of us have decided that we need to spend a little bit more time engaging with policymakers and regulators. And that's why we formed the Association of Fintechs, for example. And I'm sure there's also an association of private equity. Things are starting to happen, Robert. They're starting to happen. But you mentioned a term, distraction. Let's deal with that. And how would we use that money, that pot that we've just agreed is available and nobody is using it? And how do we counter that with foreign funding?
Actually, Ali, before you go
Please proceed.
into that pot of money is there.
Yes.
It's not there, but from a regulatory point of view, it is allowed for those funds.
So let's agree. Let us agree hypothetically that pot is there.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It requires ingredients.
Yes.
What is required is for those ingredients to be bought.
That's right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And no law is stopping these guys to go and buy those ingredients and fill that pot. Are we on the same page on that?
Let's make it even practical.
Yes.
Nothing is stopping any of the pension funds today from investing in all these startups that have had some pretty decent valuations since inception to where they are. Nothing is stopping them from doing it.
So we'll come to that conversation about valuation in a minute.
Yeah.
But Robert, I'm coming back to you.
Yes.
Why is that money not being invested when it is available? So we've talked about education. You have put all the blame on these young people who are supposed to engage with government and policymakers, and yet they have no clue on how to do it. They're just starting to wake up to that. Now, let me put it to you, Robert.
Yes.
Openly, we've discussed this every time.
Yes.
The onus is not just on these startup founders who are young, who have no clue about policy and regulation. And I keep on talking about this every day. And I will continue to repeat it until we drill it down to everyone in this country. Let me repeat it again.
Yeah.
Walking into a restaurant, you have three choices. Number one, you have a choice to be at the seat being served food. Number two, you are the waiter who's serving. Number three, you have no clue. You're on the menu being eaten. Are we together?
Yeah.
Now, what we are saying is that we are eating our young people. Literally, we are eating our young people. So, as a country, you are big in this conversation around country. Can we shift that responsibility a bit and say, fine, is young innovators have not done a good job up to now, but what is government there for? Is government there to serve itself, or is government there to serve the people? Robert, over to you.
So I would say now, as age 15 to 50, in my view, in Kenya, we have that responsibility. Unless we have that fire burning that we want our country to get ahead. And that's why we need to balance. That those personal achievements, like today I've raised $1 million, that is good. We'll tell you congratulations. You've moved estates maybe from Nairobi West to Karen. Those are good achievements. But at national level, we also need to dedicate time for that. And when we have that, then we now will remove this situation whereby it is the VCs who seem to be controlling the ecosystem. People are sitting away every week. They share like this is how much has been raised. It is like an excitement. So I can already read the rhythm. So that's all they're talking. The next week, some startup in Ghana has issues with the regulation. Now they tell guys, hey, let's pause again. Now you need to be regulated. So the conversation is not well structured. It's here and there. It's like what is going on Twitter. Just people joining the bandwagon. And there's zero guidance, even in terms of just telling people that, yes, Robert, yes, Ali, Peter, if you have excess, actually VC is a good type of funding.
Good.
If you have 1 million Kenya shillings, you can actually put 50,000 there. And if many of us put 50,000, the startup can be funded. So changing cultures and things, that's where...
changing culture.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, Robert, I'm going to have to stop you there because we're almost running out of time.
Yes.
I want to come back to Peter. Peter, in 2 minutes. Before we started here, we had this super interesting conversation around growth for the sake of growth. And you said something that still sticks to my mind. You should not scale
a mistake.
Could you kindly talk a little bit about that? And then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, and I think Robert has a very good take on husbanding resources in the right way possible. And this is actually very important for startups, that you need to be very patient for growth. And this is actually a message to the VCs also. In this continent, you need to be patient for growth, but you need to be impatient for unit economics.
Could you expound on that?
That's what I want to go. You need to be very patient for growth, because you're actually investing in something that is supposed to create a market. If you're actually not creating a new market, then it's actually not supposed to be a super high growth technology or innovation-led business. So therefore, you can be patient for growth because you're creating a market, but you have to be impatient for unit profitability, especially
unit economics.
Unit economics or unit profitability. That is, if you're losing money on every order that you process, then there is no way you're going to make money even at 1 million orders. Right? Scale does not solve unit economic problems. And so, therefore, from the inception, as you think about your business model, and revenues models change, as I talked about earlier and introduced Gobeba pivot, is because we realized that the unit economics at scale would actually mean useless growth, right? It doesn't really matter how much you scale for as long as you're scaling on negative unit economics.
Guys, honestly, I think I'm going to have each one of you separately, because we're not going to cover this conversation today. We are coming to the end of this episode of Ali Talks Tech. Robert, thank you so much for your insights. Peter, I really, really, really appreciate your insights, but I see that both of you still have so much to talk about. So I will speak to my team and see whether in the near future that will not bring you guys back, but this time separately. This conversation has been super exciting, guys. I want to thank everyone for listening in. I would also like to ask you guys to like our YouTube channel and follow us on all the podcast channels that we are in. That is Spotify, Google Podcast, and I think Apple Podcasts. Thank you, guys. and see you next time.